Hey everybody, welcome to Leading Thriving Cities. This is our show where we shine a spotlight on leaders in public service. And we have deep conversations about sustainability and how we create a thriving future for our cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners. I am joined today by Thomas Hunter. He is an assistant city manager of Pflugerville, Texas. This is such a good conversation about the value of public service and the professionals that are all throughout it. And we get into really storytelling and how much it matters to cities. This is a key that I think cities are really going to have to embrace in the future. We are going to have to help people understand what a vital, important, and sacred role we play in public service. And Thomas has some great thoughts on that. He also helps us look at places outside of public service, studying leadership from different areas to take different aspects in that we might need to learn. You're going to love this conversation. Thank you for joining us today on Leading Thriving Cities. All right, Thomas, thank you so much for being here on Leading Thriving Cities, man. We're excited to have you. I've gotten to know you a little bit through kind of the work we've done in Pflugerville. Very interesting city. Y'all are growing like crazy, aren't you? You said something about these kind of once-in-a-lifetime projects. Y'all got a lot happening right now, don't you?
We do. It's an exciting time to be in Pflugerville. And, you know, we talk about some of the projects we've got going on. You might spend, and in your entire career, you might get one of those projects. We've got about 4 going right now.
Wow. That's exciting. So we've talked about the idea that at the ACM level, you're the assistant city manager, one of them. At the ACM level, that's a complex job. And you're doing something new all the time. And sometimes it is these once-in-a-lifetime massive projects we're working on. And then it's dealing with personnel issues and dealing with just weird stuff. What's one thing you wish people understood about that role of ACM and some of that complexity?
Man, that's a great question.
Just the one thing. That's the hard part, right?
Yeah, I think it's stepping back and almost thinking about the city manager's office. Mm-hmm. It is truly divide and conquer. Yeah. And we are so fortunate in Pflugerville having Serena Breland as our city manager. One of the things that I think she does so well and really has modeled for us is finding a way to get to yes. Especially when that is, in the city manager form of governance, you've got a council that is bringing forward, what they hear is the will of the people. Yeah. And so when you have that mentality of finding a way to get to yes, sometimes there's not a lot of predictability. Yes. In today's day and age, city government is very different than it was 20 years ago because your community is so different. Yes. And what their desires are and what the needs are of the community. So at the ACM role, it's really about being able to pivot. Yeah. It's really being able to create an environment for those that you are leading to thrive in when there can be chaos. Yes. And so that is probably the biggest charge and the thing that we spend the most amount of time focusing on. If you do it well, and we don't do it well every day, but if you do it well, you get to see people flourish and you get to see people be creative because there is just a plethora of opportunity to provide great benefit to the community. So it's diverse, it's chaotic, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
It is kind of this managed chaos, isn't it? Which is funny because we think all the time about public service and how steady and consistent everything needs to be, right? We need to be able to turn the switch and the water comes out, right? We need to have electricity flowing. We need all these things. And a lot of that stability is created through stable systems and stable ways of doing things. But the city manager's office, so much of it is about not just managing what we have, but creating the future. And the future is a little chaotic, right? Something you said there, though, we want to get to a yes. I think that's really interesting. Tell me more about that because I was working actually with the finance department the other day in a different city. And he said, we're trying to change the culture to where our job is not to say no. Our job is to find a way to a yes. It's never no, it's no, but what can we do? How can we help you out? And that culture has to be intentionally created. That is not an accident. So tell me a little more. How do y'all manage to do that?
So one of the funny things when we hear feedback or people bring to us ideas or new concepts, typically, and I think this is just us as human beings, what we do is we say, hey, I would like you to implement this tool or this widget because we've seen it work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Now, every city is created with different challenges and, debt obligations or different projects that are going on. Obviously, cities are in different points in their maturation. And so what we try to do, and it's a conscious effort, is to strip down and say, let's maybe move away from the tool that you're prescribing.
Yeah.
Tell me the why.
Yeah.
What is it you're trying to do? Are you trying to enhance quality of life?
Yeah.
Have you identified a service gap within the community? That is such an important question because all of these individuals that we interact with on a daily, hourly, minutely basis, they drive a different way to work.
Yeah.
They drop their kids off using a different, traveled way than maybe we do.
Yeah.
And so they're getting a different user experience within the community. So if I can get beyond the initial request and really understand the intent, there may be 3 or 4 other ways that we can get there. Or maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration that if I just simply applied the tool, or if I just simply said that tool doesn't meet our portfolio, we've missed this great opportunity. So it's about digging deeper into what the desire is or what the service gap is. That's what allows us to really find a way to get to yes, or to find a way to get to some sort of a collaboration where there's extreme benefit.
Well, it sounds like it's even getting to the right yes.
Yeah.
Because it's super easy to say no. It's super easy also just to say, yeah, let's just do it, right? But the why, we might find a better yes to say, yeah, that tool is interesting, but your why might be better fulfilled if we tried this. What have you thought of that, And I'm guessing that applies both externally and internally as well. So when you've got directors bringing you new things or assistant directors bringing you new things and saying, hey, we want to try this, that why matters deeply, doesn't it?
It matters deeply. I think it's important that we give people the space to really explain the why because it's a really fulfilling and empowering kind of process to walk through.
Yeah.
But the other thing that is critically important to anybody who's in the city management profession is really to look at the things that drive us. And especially if you're an ICMA member, a TCMA member, we have a duty, we have a responsibility to clearly paint the picture for both sides of every issue. Is to say that this could be an option. And here's the pros and the cons, right? We've got strategic plans and comprehensive plans and budgets and all of these things that have been curated over many, many, many years. So as new programs or ideas come along, it's more about the value proposition of how does this fit within the policy that's been set by council.
And helping people understand the complexity of all that, right?
Exactly.
They get so focused on here's my pain or my problem and I want to solve this. And they may even bring a solution, right? But they don't understand how does that little puzzle piece fit in with this massive picture that we're trying to put together.
Right.
Okay. That's interesting. Have your people, as y'all have talked more about, we've got to talk about the why behind things. Have you found your team get better at bringing the why from the very beginning, that they start really thinking that through and become a little more proactive about it?
Definitely. A lot of the folks that I have the privilege of leading, they get really tired of hearing me talk about defining success and working backwards from what does success look like. But it's a repetition that we go through all the time. Doing that and walking through that process has really allowed them to evaluate, kind of pre-evaluate the why, so to speak. And you'll see that the language start to change as they grow and mature to where they're saying, I've got an idea that I think really fits in with this part of the strategic plan. I think we could advance this portion of our charge if we were to look at something like this, as opposed to, I have an idea for a program and it's going to cost $300,000 annually.
Yes. They're learning the art of storytelling, right? Because often getting people on board involves a great story. And how does that story then line up with your needs and my needs and where we're headed together? That's a story that's easy to get on board for. I've got an idea and it's $300,000. You've given me an easy way to say no at that point. You haven't given me the things I need to actually say yes. That is really interesting. And it's funny you say they're tired of hearing you talk about defining success. But in reality, that is our job as leaders, is always pointing people to the basics, right? Leadership is not that complex. Finding success is not complex. But I'm shocked how often people don't define success.
Yeah.
They just start running in a direction because the direction looks exciting.
Right.
It's a new thing. Great. How are we going to know if we're successful? Because if we're not, we need to know that, because you don't want to get to the end of the journey and go, well, that was in no way successful. You want to see along the way, do we have progress? Are there markers there?
Yeah.
And honestly, from our perspective, from leadership, we're always looking at, are we defining success in a way that's sustainable? So if success is, we push the boulder up the mountain, can we actually do that and still go home to our families at night and still be good at home, right? Or are we going to be so stressed and so burned out there's nothing left there?
Right.
And so that definition of success is really interesting. There's also a lot of ways to think about success. And so do you find department by department, they're learning how to think about it for what it looks like for them? And is it different across the range there?
It's very different.
Yeah.
And I think specifically about, all of our directors and the departments that they're, responsible for, they interact with different groups within the community.
Yeah.
And so I think because of those relationships and the different service needs, oftentimes defining success looks different. And there's this unique opportunity and challenge that exists right there, which is what may be success to one department may be viewed as a challenge for another.
Yeah.
Yes. Having really strong conversations about the overall direction and realizing that two things can be good at the same time. Yeah. And finding how to blend those together is critically important. We talk about communication and collaboration all the time. But is that happening at a level such that as you define success, are you bringing your partners along with you early in the process?
Yes.
So it's not viewed as a challenge or an impediment. And that is a daily, just a daily effort. To really look at that.
Well, it's so common for those silo walls to harden between the departments. And we're so focused on, I need this new thing. I need to go in this new direction for us. We don't pause and think, how does this affect public works? How does this affect finance? How does this affect all the people going to be required to actually make this successful? And so involving them early, that I'm guessing y'all have, like everything else, you've done that really well sometimes. And there's been some challenges sometimes where we have not done that as well.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things. It's an ongoing practice. We're never done, are we?
No. No. And ultimately, we have great examples where that collaboration has happened. I'll even call it organically. And we've seen great benefit.
Yeah.
And we've had other times where it didn't happen. And you know what? We missed an opportunity and we didn't communicate it well.
Yes.
And realizing that is not a failure.
Yeah.
That is just an opportunity to reinforce what drives our daily process and why it's so critical.
Yes.
It's almost more of a marker of the importance of it than a failure.
Yeah.
And I think when you frame it that way, it removes a lot of the conflict that can exist.
Absolutely. And it's when you're looking at it and saying sometimes it happens organically, I think what we learned that process is we can't necessarily trust organic. Right. We've got to always have that process where it's intentional, where we are constantly deciding how are we going to do this? Because the reality is it's a process executed by humans and we are messy and complex. And I might be the best communicator on the planet. If I'm having a bad day, I don't care how this affects public works, so I'm not going to go talk to them. Right. And so ultimately we've got to make sure that process is solid. And every time we experience pain, it's like, great, we can look at this as bad. Like you said, we can see this as a failure, or we can look at this and go, man, that's another opportunity. Look at that. Yep. We're growing, we're learning, we've got this. Yeah. That's interesting. So on your journey, we've talked a lot about what we're trying to do as teams to get better. What are some things you've had to overcome on your journey in public service? How did you get to ACM, first of all? Where did you start in public service? Was it in a city manager's office or did you come through a different track?
No, I didn't have a choice.
Okay.
I came from a family with a long line of public servants and military background, and so it was bred into me at an early age. I think by the age of 15, I could rebuild a fire hydrant. I don't know if that's a good quality or a bad quality, to be honest. But But I started out, as a summer hire in high school, just maintaining properties for municipalities. And
that sounds like a lot of mowing.
Yeah. And it just, it evolved into, I became a certified water operator at a really young age. And then, just kind of you blink and all of a sudden 20 years later, there's just a lot of different stops along the way and a lot of project management and all sorts of craziness.
How did you have to grow through that process? What did you have to overcome internally to really get to this level of leadership and to do this job well?
How long do we have?
We've got an hour. Let's fill it up, man.
I think one of the biggest things that was a challenge for me early on was understanding pace and understanding that, not every problem is created equal. And so what do I mean by that? Early on, if there was something that didn't align with the direction that the city was trying to go or was viewed as a barrier or an impediment, man, we were going to win. We were going to die on that hill. And I can think back to a number of different examples, but you look back at some of those charges that you took on and the amount of time and investment that went into figuring out what needed to happen and solving the problem and putting the blinders on to do so. And what did you neglect to solve, to dedicate the time and the resources? And I don't want to say that, we weren't successful at doing all of the things that we needed to do, but did we really evaluate, is this the fight that we need to fight today?
Yeah.
And do we need to dedicate what's the impact to the organization if we take that on?
Yeah.
That's something that I think when you're younger in your career, you're just charging ahead.
Yes.
I see the challenge and we're going to win, but what was the impact on the organization? And did you really think through all of the other things that you could have been dedicating time and resources to? And that really just goes back to having a deeper understanding of, what is the most sustainable way to manage resources in an effort to advance the city that's in alignment with its strategic plan.
Yeah.
You can't know how to do that until you've done it and failed.
Yeah.
And gone, okay, I that was a great lesson learned right there.
Well, I think as you get older too, we start focusing on the big picture a lot more, right? I think when we're young, it's just, I see the goal in front of me. I'm going to run at that as hard as I can. We don't understand there's this much, much larger picture. And I think as we advance more, those new levels of responsibility force us to see the big picture for the first time. And it's funny, I've never had anybody have that answer, but that's a great answer because it is, I think that's the human experience, right? Is we're going to die on this hill because it's so important. And we look up in 10 years and we're like, that was the least important thing ever. What the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
And yet we spent so much time, money, heartache on whatever that was. I think that's common.
Well, for me, it's been a great lesson. And what I mean by that is, what's the natural progression of somebody in their municipal career, right?
Yeah.
They're working at what we'll call kind of a line level. Eventually, they're going to promote into a supervisor position. They're going to start overseeing programs and projects. And in many ways through that process, we're still training and teaching people how to manage a single thing and how to win at that thing without the context of a much greater vision. I think one of the things that we need to really focus on, and it's another daily commitment, is allowing our mid-level managers to be involved in the larger conversation, so they can understand how all of the pieces fit together. Now, sometimes that means you're going to have to expose them to some of the messiness. But we can't expect them to get to that level and have the necessary experience if we're not exposing them to it early on.
There's nothing wrong with them understanding it now, because otherwise they're eventually going to promote and walk in the room for the first time and look around and go, I'm sorry, this is how we do things?
Right.
Like, yeah, this is hard to do. We're trying to navigate new things and create the future. That's complex. It's complicated. But what I love about that idea too is if you get your mid-level managers more involved in the big picture, that then can filter down because they can help the people on the front lines who are they're focused on the one task. I've got to get this one thing done well.
Yeah.
They can help them understand how that one thing affects so many other things in a positive way.
Right.
And that's what I think is missing a lot, because what I see is, I think often, and I don't know if this is just public service, but I see people that serve their 20, their 30, their 40 years, and by the end, they are a totally different human being. They have lost that heart for service. They are no longer great to be around because they're just unhappy all the time. And you're smiling because you're picturing those people in your head, right? It's a very common thing. And I think part of this is because we lose sight of the fact that we're making progress. If you just do the same thing every single day, you're just kind of that hamster on the wheel, right? But when you got that one leader who says, no, we are doing good, we are winning, we are impacting people, that becomes exciting. And I think you're right, that mechanism of let's let the managers see behind the curtain a little. Yeah. Let's let them see how this works. I think that makes a big difference. That's interesting.
And telling them that story, reaffirming the successes that were had, we, one thing that we do after council meetings the next morning is I meet with the entire team.
Yep.
And, some days, or some mornings, we will have gone through, a very long council meeting, and maybe there was a lot of conversation or debate or whatever it is. But what's funny is it's the mornings after council when maybe everything was passed on consent. And I want to remind them to celebrate that.
Yes.
That is a reflection of hours and days and months and sometimes years of work and building that relationship and making sure that the agenda summaries are dialed and that we've done our due diligence. If we don't remind our people about the successes they just had, city management is like, it's like the NFL. Every 2 weeks, we've got game time.
Yes.
And it's so easy to come in on Wednesday and start thinking about that next game.
Yes.
Boy, let's take a second.
Yeah.
And let's really make sure that we're highlighting all of the amazing work that was done. If you don't do that, you do end up at the end of your career a hardened individual, so to speak.
A hardened individual. The joke I always give when I'm doing these presentations is those are the people that you're clapping for them at their retirement party, not because you're proud for them, but because you don't have to see them on Monday, right? And I think that's on us as leaders to say that's not acceptable to us. We do not want anybody to have that be their career experience, because, by the way, that person that is that way at work, that is just kind of not really happy and not advancing, not growing, how do they go home?
Right.
What is their family experience like? And so I think that's our responsibility to say, no, we need to constantly be creating the practice of dialing this system in, where ultimately this is an environment where people can love the journey, where they walk away every day going, you know what? I made a difference today. People's lives are better because I showed up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you always been, and it's taken me a lot of years to get there, by the way. I'm not a celebrator of wins naturally. I am like, guys, I see how big the mountain is. Why are we going to stop and have a pizza party about this right now? Come on, let's keep climbing, And what I learned was I burned people out doing that, and really burned myself out unknowingly doing that. Do you naturally celebrate wins, or is that something you have to be really intentional about?
I will say I wasn't always natural about it.
Okay.
And I did experience some of the same things that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Of kind of you read the temperature of the room as you're continuing on with these meetings, and you just see this kind of, all of a sudden, wait, nobody's excited, right? Well, have we taken the time to tell our story?
Yeah.
Have we talked about, do they understand how appreciated they are for doing some truly amazing community enhancement work? It was intentional at some point in my career. It was an intentional shift. And part of that is because I am a perfectionist. I am a driver.
Yeah.
To me, the challenge comes up and okay, we're going.
Yeah. Give me those tasks. Let's go knock this out.
So it was intentional.
Yeah.
The difference is when you make that shift in your career, you almost wonder how you weren't that way. I mean, it just becomes so impactful and important in your day to day.
Yeah.
And so it's funny as your teams change, as people come into that team and you see maybe they haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch that maturation as they step into that. But
well, I always refer to it as a leader being a cheerleader.
Yeah.
They should walk out of all those meetings excited. And that takes excitement from us.
Yeah.
Are we excited about the wins? Are we excited about our jobs and the progress and all the things we're doing? And I think that's hard because if we're not excited, they're not going to be either.
Right.
And so it's, again, I think all this goes back to leadership health. How are we investing in ourselves to maintain that? Because the excitement doesn't come naturally. The excitement is probably the first thing to leave when we start to burn out and when we get exhausted. And so maintaining that, that's real work. I'm curious, what do you do to invest in yourself? Like, how do you maintain that energy to say, I am the cheerleader of this team and I'm going to make sure you all understand you're awesome?
You know, I had the opportunity to talk about this a couple of weeks ago. So it's kind of a near and dear concept right now, but a number of years ago, kind of had a little bit of a reflection on this, and it took me down this journey of thinking about the leaders that I had in my life. And you know, obviously I've got a bunch of amazing leaders and mentors in my life now, but really reflecting on, hey, where did I come from? And what were the impressions that I received? And through that, I realized that there were some really impactful people in my life that were phenomenal cheerleaders.
Yeah.
And I think about the experiences that I had when working within those teams. Now, I had some leaders in my life that were not.
Yes.
And the experiences that I had there.
Yeah.
And some of the tendencies or things that drove me to really, you know, just be a workaholic.
Yeah.
And what I found was that when I worked in environments where we were celebrating, right? We were taking time to really reflect on how important and amazing the work we had done was.
Yeah.
I was a better father. I was better to the people around me.
Yeah.
I was looking to fill other people's cup. And so kind of you have to be very intentional about what kind of a leader you want to be.
Yes.
And thinking about where did I thrive and how can I recreate some of those things?
Yeah.
You have to be retrospective and introspective at the same time.
Yeah.
Because if we don't fully understand what made us,
yes,
we're missing a huge component.
You know, it's funny. I was on a flight yesterday and I was talking to a gentleman and he's talking about how he has this mentor group of fellow really, really successful guys. And this woman came in and she was considering a new job, new promotion. And she said, what do you guys think? Should I take this? And he said, before we answer that, I've got a question for you. Who are you? And she stopped and went, what do you mean? Like, I need to know about this job. I don't know how to answer that question. And I think the reality is until we learn how to answer that question, until we do the introspective work, until we dive deep into our challenges that we create and how do we get better and grow, we're never going to grow and change as leaders. And so I think you're right. There is something to that. And one of the things you said is we pause to celebrate wins. I think there's something that I'm just realizing that it is in the pausing to say, guys, it's okay to put the work down right now. It is okay to stop and do something that really, really matters, and it's to celebrate. I think that sets this rhythm in this example that it's okay to pause. It's okay to not be working 24/7 because I think that's our natural. We're trying to please the people around us, right? We're trying to prove something to them, so we do that. And ultimately, that doesn't work out particularly well for us. Those seasons when you were working for the leaders that were a little more challenging, we'll say, is a nice way to say it. Did you tend towards the workaholism side of things more when you were under those leaders?
100%.
Okay.
100%. There was never a sense of, you know, we accomplished the thing.
Yeah.
It was cool. This thing's due Friday. And so it was kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy of doing more.
Yeah.
Working 12, 13 hours just resulted in the next deadline shifting up.
Yes.
And so, you know, when you work in that environment, it's not that there isn't more priorities. It's not that there's not more work.
Yeah.
It's not that there's not another 1,000 emails that are waiting to be read.
Yeah.
But if that's the mentality, guys, we want leaders that have space to be able to pour into other people and to listen intentionally to the community's desires. And if all we're concerned about is checking boxes and submitting reports, we're missing the boat.
Yes.
I mean, 100%. an opportunity that that came up where I was kind of talking about communities that are changing and building future leaders, and I referenced some really, really amazing individuals that, from a leadership perspective, are pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. And outwardly, they're known for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But when you dig inwardly into what they do with their teams, mm-hmm. it was remarkable the amount of care that they took for their teams and the space that they created. And those teams that were not accused of being workaholics, mm-hmm. that did take time to go to their daughter's softball game or whatever it was, were outpacing and outworking all of these other, these other examples of folks that were just working for entities that didn't understand pace.
Yes. That's it. How do we get more done? We just need to be intentional about the things that really matter.
Yeah.
And the reality is those going to your daughter's event, that really matters.
Yeah.
And it matters to us as humans, which means the human doing the production, it's going to matter to the production and the productivity. And so there's something to that. And I think there's tons of math that shows that works. There's tons of studies that show if we work beyond, I think it's like 50 hours a week, everything after that is just not great. Like the output is not good. Yeah, we got the report done. The report's garbage. Yeah. And then we're going home exhausted. And so there's something to that. I love that so much. And I think what's interesting is you said if you really dug in and looked at those leaders' teams and how they operate, you saw something extraordinary because you saw the leader that cared and invested. I think if you dug into that leader's own personal habits, you would find a leader who cares deeply about themselves and pours into themselves and is willing to invest in themselves. And that growth path it's everything. And I think that's where you see the great leaders. I don't know that you can be a great leader without going down that path. I really don't. I think we can accidentally do some great things, but not long term.
Right. Yeah. So, accidental success.
Yes, we can accidentally be successful every once in a while. Obviously, with your role, it's varied, right? There's 1,000 different things you're doing, and you said there's these 4 or 5 really big, once in a lifetime projects you're in the middle of right now. What do you say to somebody that's thinking about getting into public service? Because I think in public service, we're struggling more and more to recruit, especially at the front lines. And so what advice would you give to them? Because they didn't all grow up knowing how to reassemble a fire hydrant by 14 years old, right? And so what would you tell somebody who's just getting their first exposure to public service?
Well, I think I would warn them that once public service sinks its teeth into you, you're never going to leave.
You're never getting out.
I think of all the different things that you could do in your life, and for me, service is such a big component mm-hmm. because you truly get to impact people's lives.
Yeah.
You truly get to hear the pain points and the struggles, and it could be something massive. It could be public access to broadband, right? Mm-hmm. It could be something as minor as, hey, this stop sign's leaning.
Yeah.
But recognizing every single person that interacts with a municipality, you're changing how they view public service.
Yes.
And understanding that when you work in public service, you have that opportunity to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Is so huge. I mean, we could talk about the benefits of the career.
Right.
We could talk about, stability and all of these sort of like what I call like brick and mortar things that come with a career. But when you have the opportunity to walk away from a situation, knowing that you were able to identify a solution that helped this person have a different experience in the community that they live in, or that you were able to, in some cases, protect future services by making smart and prudent, financial decisions. That is huge.
Yes.
I think it's funny, all the different things that we get to do, we talk about whether it's the water utility or the transportation department or emergency management or development, whatever it is. These things all touch people on a daily basis.
Yes.
And oftentimes they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Getting the opportunity to see that side of it, it's a difference. You see a different side of humanity.
Yeah.
You have to evaluate yourself differently. And so if you're looking for a career that is going to pour into you, that's going to stretch you, that's going to ask you to, quite honestly, mature at a pace that's faster than a lot of other careers will.
That's a good point. I've never really thought about that, but it kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because these services are so vital.
Right.
Yeah.
There really isn't a lot of opportunity for failure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you only get to shut the water off to the community so many times before there's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. And so operating in that way, and I've talked about this before, in many ways, it's almost like, you're operating in an environment that is high risk and very fast paced.
Yes.
And so when you get into a municipal career, boy, take your time.
Yeah.
Enjoy the ride, learn the pieces in the very beginning, and create a solid foundation for yourself. And this career will take you places. You will meet people that will enhance your life beyond anything you could imagine.
Yeah.
I can't speak to many other careers because, quite honestly, I've been in municipal service my entire life.
Yeah.
But I cannot imagine somebody getting into this line of work and thinking to themselves, that wasn't important.
Yeah.
I didn't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And it didn't grow me in ways that I probably would never have grown.
Well, in so much of that, I think the ones we referenced earlier that finish their careers and they don't feel fulfilled, so much of it is leaders above them that don't remind them every day, hey, you matter.
Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned there was often the services we provide, people aren't even aware of it. They're not aware of the work we do. And I've heard some people say, if we're doing our job well, they don't even know we're here. And I get that. We're saying nothing's breaking and nobody's freaking out at us. But ultimately, one of the things I'm seeing is cities need to do a better job of people understanding we're here, understanding the important and sacred work that y'all are doing. That I've been talking more and more through the things I'm doing about the idea of this being sacred work. And we reserve sacred for, like, it has religious overtones, right? You're a pastor, a priest, or a missionary, whatever it is. But there's a definition of sacred that says worthy of awe and respect. And I can think of nothing more worthy of awe and respect than public service, than being there to keep the underpinnings of society functioning well. That matters so much. And so I'm curious, how are y'all telling your story to actually get that out there more? Because I've even seen on LinkedIn the videos y'all are producing. There was one where y'all actually went into a water tower to show people what that was like. Now, I'm a giant nerd, I will acknowledge, but I was fascinated by that video. What are y'all doing to be innovative in that space and tell that story better?
Well, I mean, here's going to be a huge shout out to our communications department.
Yes.
We have some of the most creative, wonderful human beings over there. Yeah. I mean, the ideas that they bring forward are tremendous.
Yeah.
The cool thing, there's a compliment to that. I've worked in other organizations where there was great ideas, but the leadership said, no, I don't want to risk being out there.
Yeah.
I would rather fly under the radar.
Yeah.
And that, quite honestly, can be one of the biggest crimes against humanity.
Yes, because especially long term, that can hurt us.
We've got a communications department that knows how to tell our story in a way that people can relate to.
Yes.
In a way that describes the impact, but also invites and solicits public input, which is the essence of why we're here.
Yeah.
They do such a phenomenal job. And some of those videos are so stinking creative. It's kind of hard not to chuckle. But it is important. You've got to find a way to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Simply posting something in the newspaper.
Yeah. Doesn't work.
It's not going to get the traction.
You literally have Community Impact headquartered in Pflugerville.
Right.
And they do an amazing job. But at the end of the day, we have to impact them in multiple different ways, right? We have to connect all over the place, don't we?
We do. And so, again, you've got to have folks that are passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
They're empowered to bring forward the crazy idea.
Yeah.
And then you've got to have a leadership that says, we value how you want to message this.
Yes.
That is the unique relationship that allows some of those great things to happen.
Yeah.
And we're trying every single day to find new ways to, heck, I think our parks department, when they were doing a public engagement process relative to a new parks plan, I think they got like a truck and put this huge billboard on it, drove it around to community events and gave people like chalk and markers and said, draw out your ideas. And then they incorporated it into the plan.
That's really cool.
It's just a different way of we're coming to you.
Yes.
And we're going to let you draw your ideas.
Yes. So I love that, because we complain all the time about the lack of civic engagement, the lack of voter turnout, the lack of people showing up to city council meetings, the lack of people really involved.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because we sit back and say, well, here's the ways you can be involved. Come to us. I love the idea of, we're not going to wait on that. We're going to go engage. We're going to go connect with you where you are. And I think the beauty of that relationship too is, here's the reality. At some point, the water will go off. At some point, something will break, and you're going to have moments of inconvenience. And if in those moments we have not built relationship, it's going to be, man, I hate this city. I cannot believe I don't have water for 30 minutes, Mm-hmm. But if we've built the relationship, there's trust, and we go, okay, it's off now. It'll be back on soon. Right. I know they've got this. They're so good at what they do. And that's that output, or that outcome of that great storytelling. That is really interesting.
It is. And I think about another great example is you talk about major roadway reconstruction.
Yeah.
The city of Pflugerville is in the beginning processes of a project called 685 project, which will rebuild and transform the major artery of the transportation network within the community. Boy, that's going to be a multi-year, very congested,
very dusty,
difficult.
Yes.
We've got to build relationships, or continue to invest in those relationships that we've built by telling that story, bringing people along at every stage of the process, making sure that what their desires are they're seeing through that process. It's all about relationship. Yeah. We can rebuild the road. That's not terribly difficult. We've got engineers that know what they're doing.
Okay, and first of all, everybody that works under you right now is like, what the hell? Did he just say that's not difficult? It's difficult.
It's difficult. It's difficult. But it's that relationship process with all of the different stakeholders that ultimately will guide the success or failure. Whether we rebuild the road, it will not be judged solely on the physical construction. No. It will be judged on the process by which we go through. Yeah. And that's where we do have so many phenomenal people and so many, great engineers and others, where we have these public input sessions, and they're out there in the crowd talking to people. Yeah. I mean, they're really trying to engage.
Yeah. And so much of that is not just, did we get the road completed? It's how did people feel in the process? Yeah. And the communication, the connection is where that happens. It's funny. I was up in the Dallas area this weekend, and I heard two people, they were complaining about construction, which is easy to do. It's not convenient, right? It is messy. And they were just, it's terrible. I hate everything about this. And I just asked them, I said, hey, what's it going to be like when it's done? And they paused for a minute and kind of thought, probably for the first time, they're like, actually be pretty nice. We'll have a few extra lanes. I was like, yeah, that's the vision, right? That's where we're going. And when that is missing, all we got is a bunch of dirt and delays, right? But when we tell the story well and we envision it well for people and help them see that, they go, okay, I get it. We're going to endure a little pain for a lot of benefit down the road. Down the road, literally.
But that's the key, right? Is acknowledging the pain.
Yes.
In so many ways, we don't say, yeah, man,
this sucks.
This is going to be tough.
Yeah.
And that driveway is going to be torn up for 3 months.
Yeah.
And sympathize with the fact that we know this isn't easy, but just like anything else in life, the growth happens on the other side of a little bit of sacrifice.
Yeah. It is acknowledging that. We had one city we were working with, even a small city, and I love how creative you can be no matter what size your city is. This is a pretty small city, and they had to do something. I can't remember what it was. They had to tear up an intersection or a road or something, and it affected some homes, and it created a lot of mess, right? And so as hey, we see you, they dropped off these car wash coupons at those homes and said, hey, we are so sorry about this. It's going to make life better. But we know in the meantime, you're going to have a really dirty car. And so can we help you with that? And it was just this beautiful idea that there's a million reasons to say no to that, right? Legal's going to get involved and go, well, what if their car gets torn up at the car wash? And then,
right.
But they managed to get to yes. And those people, it was that moment of delight, and it makes a difference. It's storytelling. And it's this camaraderie that's built. I love that. One of the other things you hit on, I love the idea that in public service, you see it's such a varied career, right? You can come in literally any way. You can come in through law enforcement, through water, you can come in through public works. You can literally just keep the poop moving through the pipes one day and you look up and you're a city manager in 20 years, right? Which is still kind of the same job, honestly.
I was just going to make the joke. You made it for me.
Same job. But there's so many varied tracks to do brand new things. But what I love is even on the front lines, there are professionals. It's easy to say, well, they're just digging a hole or welding a pipe or what. It's very blue collar jobs. These people are professional. They are so good at what they do. And I think that gets lost sometimes. It's easy to look at somebody working outside and just go, that's a pretty easy job. It's a hard job in a hard environment. And these people are smart. They're good at what they do. And I don't know if that gets celebrated quite enough. And I'm guessing you, with the departments you lead, you get to celebrate with those folks quite often, don't you?
So it's funny you say that. Last week, Texas Water was in Houston. I got to go down there, and I got to watch a number of our utility workers compete in a couple of competitions, hydrant hysteria, all this other fun, crazy stuff. I walked away from that experience watching Pflugerville. I think we had 5 or 6 different presentations that we'd put on throughout the week.
Yeah.
We had folks competing in competition, and it was so amazing to see not just their professionalism on display, but how much they care about what they do. And just off the cuff. I mean, the amount of information that they house, and it's incredible.
They're so smart.
Truly incredible. So getting to go down there and watch that was another, what we were talking about earlier, one of those. It just refills the cup.
Yes.
Just seeing how amazing, Pflugerville just being a leader in the utility industry. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's truly exciting to see because it wasn't that way 10 years ago.
Yes.
I mean, people, I don't think really had an appreciation, and they still don't, but I don't think there was nearly the appreciation, I should say, for the fact that you've got men and women out there that are responsible for something as critical as water.
Yeah.
It's the only utility you put in your mouth. Okay. It's pretty freaking important.
All right, everybody, there's his quote. That's the post that's going up. It's the only utility you put in your mouth. I've never thought of that, but that's true.
It is. It is. And so, I mean, you want to talk about all of the regulation and all of the different things that they have to comply with to make sure that we are delivering safe, clean drinking water at an affordable rate.
Yeah.
That is a challenge.
Huge.
Right.
Yeah. I'm working with a water department right now in a city, and it's water and electric. So I'm seeing two sides of this coin. It's amazing how complex that is, and how much they have to be experts, even at the lowest levels, right?
Yeah.
In order to keep that happening. And by the way, like you said, do it affordably.
Yeah.
That's the thing people don't think about. As much as they might not like how much their bill is, it could be so much worse. And so that we're doing things very efficiently. That is so interesting. So part of what I think you talked about, the passion people have for their roles and for their field. I've met so many people that are passionate about water. They're passionate about electricity. They're passionate about public works and law enforcement. And that I think we start that way. And I think the way we finish our career with that same passion involves leaders and involves being able to thrive on that journey. What is something cities need to rethink or reimagine or create in the future so their teams can thrive more consistently? Because it doesn't always happen. I think we're having to learn to be more intentional about it.
Yeah, I want to go back to kind of that retrospective, what got us here conversation. Yeah. As we look at as leaders and as the leaders that we've worked for in the past, what were the inputs that were that they had that really taught them how to be leaders? What sort of model were they working under?
Yeah.
And you can go through the 90s and the 2000s and even into the teens, and I think municipalities were stealing from the AT&Ts and the IBMs, and then that turned into the Googles and the Apples, and the differences in leadership model there weren't very different. It's just the latter involved a beanbag chair, and occasionally a ping pong table. So, but you still didn't really have.
I'm hearing we need more beanbag chairs. That's the answer, right?
But you still didn't have this true understanding for the difference between building leaders in a municipal environment versus building leaders in a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
Those are two very different animals.
Yeah.
And so when we look at, building leaders in a municipal setting, we have to understand and model ourselves after other industries that maybe aren't the ones that we've looked to in the past.
Interesting.
It's a very uncomfortable thing for us to think about because we really haven't done it as an industry. But we need to look at others who play in a high stakes, fast-paced environment because failure isn't an option. If I'm a Fortune 500 company and I have a bad year, I cut some jobs, my profit's not as high.
Yeah.
If I'm a municipality and I have failures, the consequences are dire.
Yeah. Eventually you're talking the collapse of society.
Exactly. And so why are we not looking at how they treat their teams, how they build their leaders, how they model their organizations to understand what are they doing that's different?
Do you have examples, like when you think about those industries we should model ourselves after? Do you have examples that you're thinking of?
There's a whole host of examples, and I'll just give you a couple, not to get too deep into it. I can think of some really prolific college and NFL organizations that have gone through this. Obviously, someone that you're very familiar with, Simon Sinek, has talked a lot about first responders and military organizations.
Yeah.
They move at a pace, and I want to be careful that I'm not equating municipal service to military service, but they move at a pace where success has to be sustainable. It has to be thought out.
Yeah.
They have to cultivate leadership, but equally or even more importantly, they know who they are. They have defined that success.
Yeah.
They keep that definition of success at a very narrow band so that they're not expanding themselves to the point where there's now breaks for entry.
Yeah.
And in many ways, if you look at the high stakes that happen within, professional sporting organizations, it's very similar.
Yeah.
So those are very different models. Nick Saban's a great example. Kind of what I referenced earlier. His latest book, which he didn't write, it was written by a reporter that followed him for 25 years.
Who were you telling me about this before? Yeah.
He did a deep dive into what Nick did behind the scenes with his teams.
Yeah.
Which is really what built the success.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Nick was obviously the face of it, and he was on the recruiting trail doing all these amazing things, but the things that he did to take care of his leaders, to give them the space and the freedom to be creative, to fail fast, to do all of these different components, that is truly remarkable. What you don't see in that model is a ton of bureaucracy, is a ton of top-down authoritarian style leadership.
Yeah.
You see people who are empowered so that they might have to work 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, when they go home, because of that ownership and knowing that they made a difference, they are a good human being when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
So those are just a couple little tidbits.
There's something, it's interesting pulling little bits from each of those things, right? Because I think there's a lot of correlations between leadership in the military that really transfers well to public service. There's some that don't, because at the end of the day, we're not quite fighting a war, right? However, one of the things you said there is they know who they are.
Yeah.
I think about everybody I know that's in the Army, that's in the Marines, that's in the Navy, that's in the Air Force. They're really proud of that.
Yep.
And they should be. I wonder how much public servants are truly proud that they're public servants. I mean, we should be. We should be so excited about the idea that we are a part of this not necessarily army, but this army of people that are giving their lives to make society work. Because the other thing I think we share in common with the military is if we don't do our jobs well, people will die.
Yeah.
I think that's the other side of it is we don't understand how fragile our society is.
Right.
We don't have to go very long without water or power or streets before everything starts to fall apart.
If they miss the garbage 2 weeks in a row.
Okay, you're literally the second person that I did bring up that example, but you're right.
We're going to have a problem on
that.
We're going to have a mutiny.
Yeah, you're going to have a mutiny if garbage starts stacking up, right? And so I think there's so many of those things that we just take for granted. And as public servants, and I'm seeing more and more as leaders when we talk about this sacred work, we need to help them understand that it's sacred, that it is worthy of respect. They should be so proud to be public servants that they cannot wait to tell everybody, right? It's like, hey, how do you know somebody's a pilot? They'll tell you. It's that same kind of thing. Like, how do you know somebody's in public service? We should tell people, I'm in public service. That should be an exciting thing.
Well, one of the great markers, I've said this before, is do your people wear their city gear when they're not at work?
Yeah.
That'll tell you real quick
absolutely
how they view their organization, whether they're proud of the direction, and whether they feel like they are a part of it.
Yes.
One of the things a couple of years ago that I started saying every time we got the group together is you are the backup.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As a public servant, you are the backup. Nobody's coming to save you.
Yeah.
Right? When the weather hits, when we've got to get roads cleared so first responders can get to people's homes and take care of cardiac events and all the other amazing work that they do.
Yeah.
We can't just tap out.
Yeah.
And so when you start kind of helping them understand and feel that sense of sacred work, there's a shift that happens, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah. And that's where you get that extra mile out of people, right? That's where they're willing to do more.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Man, Thomas, this has been the best conversation. Thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me, Chad.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. You might also like our other podcast, The Leader Lab. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. Just search for The Leader Lab. Each episode is under 10 minutes. It's just a quick thought to help you level up your leadership. You'll also find all the other leadership content we are putting out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner.